بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم والعن أعداءهم وقتلتهم وظالميهم ومخالفيهم أجمعين. السلام عليك يا مولاي وسيدي يا صاحب الأمر والزمان. السلام عليك يا بقية الله أيها المهدي الموعود المنتظر. أسعد الله أيامكم سعيدة. May Allah bless you with His special attention and gifts on this auspicious night as we are approaching the anniversary of the birthday of the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi. Ajjal Allah Ta'ala Farajahu al-Sharif. May Allah hasten his reappearance. Dear brothers and sisters, viewers of Imam Hussein TV, it is my great pleasure to be talking to you in this series of talks entitled The Universal Reformer. I have here in the studio with me the great cleric, Sayyidina Sayyid Ali Nawab, to be exploring this topic in more detail and the branches of this, let's say, arc topic. Tonight, we shall be discussing one of the most important, relevant issues with regard to this topic that I mentioned earlier, and I hope that you stay with us throughout the program and benefit from the interesting words of Ahlul Bayt talk to you through our great guest. That is my pleasure to be in his company. Salam alaikum Sayyidina. Assadallah ayyamkum.
I also would like to congratulate you and our dear respected brothers and sisters, the viewers of Imam Hussein TV, and I would like to use this opportunity to welcome them to the holy city of Karbala.
Great.
In these very holy hours. As you mentioned, we are drawing closer to the anniversary of the birthday of the Imam of our time, Salamullahi alayhi. And inshallah, we use these important hours to educate ourselves with lessons that draw us closer to knowing our Imam and also to connecting and accompanying our Imam, inshallah.
Inshallah. So let's bless the program with sending salutations and salam
Inshallah.
on behalf of all the respected viewers and our dear brothers and sisters who are watching this program.
Inshallah. Santum. On behalf of our brothers and sisters, their marhumeen, mu'mineen, mu'minat all around the world, we recite these salams and salutations. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alayka ya mawlaya ya Aba Abdillah. Assalamu alayka ya ibna Rasulillah. Assalamu alayka ya ibna Amir al-Mu'mineen wa ibna Sayyid al-Wasiyyin. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا قمر العشيرة يا أبا الفضل العباس. السلام عليك وعلى أمك الطاهرة أم البنين. السلام عليك وعلى أختك المظلومة الحوراء زينب. السلام عليكم سادتي وموالي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ahsantum. Thank you very much, Sayyidina. Well, last night we discussed some of the important concepts and perhaps qualities that we need to acquire in order to be able to accompany the Imam of our time, or perhaps even greater, to be in his service. May Allah bestow us and grant us such great fortune and opportunity.
Inshallah.
We discussed the importance of a higher degree of piety, which might be translated as pious behavior and self-restraint in Arabic, that is wara.
Wara,
And also mahasinul akhlaq, which are the, let's say, highest rankings and grades of morals and ethics that we need to practice. It is not a matter of heart only, but more a matter of practice. And you gave us very interesting examples and stories to illustrate how these concepts should actually be implemented in our lives. There is just an example I have heard from some great clerics such as yourself, when they want to describe the concept of vara, they describe it as like a barbed fence with electricity running through it. Of course, a person practicing taqwa, which is piety, would refrain from touching that barbed, let's say, fence, because he knows that electricity will give him an electric shock, and he will be, of course, hurt, if not die. But a person practicing varat, which is a higher degree of self-restraint and piety, would not even get close to that fence, lest or in fear that he may stumble into somehow that fence and of course get hurt. So I think just as an example to clarify the concept. But tonight let's discuss the ways we can truly connect with our Imam and the bonds, because there are perhaps several methods and there are schools of thoughts which prescribe different, let's say, ways, like intellectual methods, relying solely on our intellect and psyche and our understanding and cognition. Those who take it merely as a matter of heart and establishing an emotional bond with the Imam, and those who perhaps restrict themselves to a more academic, let's put it this way, approach, and that is to solely rely on literature of hadith, narrations, and traditions that we have in the legacy of Ahlul Bayt. Which of these methods are more practical in our attempt to get closer to the Imam of our time as the source of spirituality, as the, let's say, only means of salvation? Is there any prescription which can combine all of these, perhaps?
Ahsantum. Very well put. Again, after the first couple of nights where we are discussing under the general title of reforming, and how Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, is a universal reformer, and he will come to reform not only the nations from the aspects of financial, political, safety, security, but also will place his hands upon their heads to complete their intellects from a mental perspective, meaning that ignorance will be perished, and those fortunate enough to be living at the time of the reappearance of the Imam alayhi salam will be reaching a very high level and standard of understanding the requirements to be alongside the Imam, living at the same time the Imam has reappeared, and know what the Imam actually requires them to do. Yesterday as you said, we spoke about how to prepare ourselves in order to become an individual who walks in the path of accompanying the Imam of his time. That was on the personal, emotional desires, all of these kind of stuff, with them aspects of the higher degrees of wara and piety, which, as you very nicely put, is not even thinking of going towards things that may lead you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also preserving the highest ranks of morals, akhlaq and ethics. Now tonight, some of our youth, some of our dear young brothers and sisters, and also the elders, who happen to be living in a society, in an environment that, as you said, there are different schools of thought, there are different methods of thinking, there are different ways to choose how you want to progress in your life. The first, and of course, each person or each group of people are divided according to what they think is the right path. At the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided all the tools around us. He's given us the intellect, He's given us the brain, and He said this is the path towards the paradise, and this is the path towards, God forbid, the hellfire. And you make your own decisions. That's why you see people live according to what they believe is the right path. Each person living however they wish and like. So each group of people, each community, each society, you will see they will be divided into different paths. The first path that I wanted to discuss which is one of the most common ways or paths, specifically in the Western society. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other societies, but we find it most in societies that have universities and university lecturers, and you have to produce a paper if you want to apply for a PhD, this kind of stuff. They tend to concentrate on intellect. Mm-hmm. They put aside everything to do with emotions and desires. They say you need to concentrate and decide and choose the sources that makes sense to you intellectually. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, I will try my best to give examples of all of these different paths and how each one has its negatives. For example, those who choose to deal with the issue of Mahdawiyya, those individuals who choose to look at the issue of the reappearance or awaiting being titled as the Muntadhar of the Imam of our time from an intellectual perspective. These individuals, they tend to come and question some of the narrations that come and, for example, speak about the signs, the alamat that will happen before the reappearance of the Imam. For example, we have narrations that speak about the sun rising from the west. Now, someone who wants to stick to the intellectual side of things will come and sit down and try to solve things scientifically. As they do when they want to solve a mathematical equation or a physical or a physics formula. They will put 2 and 2 makes 4. So he will try to say, okay, you as followers of the awaited one, or I as a young man or a young lady studying in the West, what am I supposed to say to my friends when I tell them there is an Imam who is still alive, but there will be time that he will reappear. But before he comes, there are signs. How am I supposed to explain to them that one of the signs is that the sun will rise from the west? They will look at me and say, are you crazy? It doesn't make sense. Scientifically, currently, the sun rises from a different side of the world,
yes,
from the different position. But what they fail to understand is that when it comes and we look at religion from a religious point of view, religion tends to be more superior, more stronger when it comes to intellectuality and looking at things merely from an intellectual perspective.
So that brings up a very, I suppose, important topic that prevails in the West more, let's say, predominantly, and that is what is the scope of intellect, and this watching through the lens of intellect at everything. What is the position of our intellect and psyche, and how can we reconciliate it with the words of Ahlul Bayt?
Again, let it not confuse our dear viewers by me saying that the intellect will contradict with the religious rulings or the ahadith and narration traditions of the reappearance of the Imam. It doesn't mean that Islam or Allah, God forbid, doesn't want you to head towards intellectuality.
Exactly.
No, Islam is the religion of intellectuality. Islam and the first verse of the Holy Quran was revealed upon the Holy Prophet of Islam, and it instructed the Holy Prophet of Islam to walk in the path of learning and intellectuality. But the first method that we are trying to discuss, that we want to prove to our brothers and sisters, that merely looking at the reappearance or the whole issue of Mahdawiyyah from a lens of only intellectuality, away from emotions, away from looking at the ahadith and traditions of Ahlul Bayt, that is wrong. Because it doesn't go hand in hand.
Yes.
You won't be able to reach the conclusion that Islam wants from you. As I said, years back, scientifically, it wasn't logical for people to come out and say that the sun will rise from the west. But nowadays, there are scientists, there are university professors that come and issue papers discussing that how it is possible that we are gradually, the solar system is rotating, the cycle is going around in a way where eventually the sun will rise from the west. Or once upon a time, when people came and read narrations that how a brother in the west is able to speak with a brother in the east at the same time, look at him, hear him, and be able to communicate in a split second. They used to say, this is absurd. How it takes months for someone to travel from one point to another. There are narrations that speak about how brother or a family member is able to communicate if he's living in Iraq and the other brother is living in, for example, the United States of America. But nowadays it's scientifically proven, and people are holding these smartphones that in a split second I can, with the press of a button, I can speak to my family members all the way in Australia.
Just a few clicks away.
Just a few clicks away. So merely looking at the issue of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam from an intellectual perspective would make you fall into areas that you will confuse yourself, let alone go in the path of deviation, God forbid. Because you will say, okay, it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
This will not go in hand with what I believe and what I understand.
Because of the limitations of the intellect and
exactly.
our cognition, we may actually decide to question them or we may decide to reinterpret them or deny them, God forbid,
Exactly.
and then the result will be deviation from the right path.
Why deviation? Why am I using this very sensitive word? Is because Islam and the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam relies upon a high number of narrations that speak about dua and supplication, that speak about, for example, pleading and begging the Imam of the time to have a closer look upon you. Intellectually, today, if you come and say to a young man or a young lady who is a university, and this happens, by the way, I get lots of university students that are so gone deep into their studies, and their look towards life is so, mathematical, and some equations and formulas, that when you come to say to them that you need to have another look towards your life, and that look means supplicating, begging, pleading, asking, requesting from Allah. They say, we're having trouble to understand what you're saying. And we need to explain to them that there is another aspect of your life, not only, intellectually, but there are also times where you need to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah says, recite the Holy Quran, supplicate. We are arriving at the month of Ramadan. The holy month of Ramadan is a month of Quran. The holy month of Ramadan is a month of dua and supplication.
And supplications perhaps are the best tool to render your heart more lenient and polish your heart for spirituality.
Exactly.
Because without spirituality, as you said, you will perhaps grow one-dimensional.
Exactly.
Rather than...
And as you said, if there is no aspect of spirituality, no emotions, your faith, your religion, your belief will be so rigid.
Yes.
It will be dry.
Yes.
And as we can see, other faiths, other schools of thought, when you look at their religion and how they practice their religion, is so empty.
Yes.
Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they don't want that. They want, at the same time that you are concentrating on elevating yourself intellectually and elevating your understanding of the life and the world around you, at the same time they want you to elevate yourself spiritually. That's why taking the path of merely intellect and being so intellectual, other than spirituality and emotions and dua and supplication, is not the right way, let's say, in approaching the issue of Mahdawiyah and drawing closer, wanting to accompany the Imam of your time, because the Imam of your time has attributes that he wants his followers to carry those attributes as well. What are the attributes? The attributes are that the Imam alayhi salam, he himself prays for you. So you should pray for him as well. It's not only a one-sided connection or one-sided relationship.
Yep. Reciprocal sort of
exactly. You give and take.
Yeah.
The same way that you want the Imam to have a hand or come and interfere and help and support and turn your life upside down into a positive life, at the same time the Imam says that you need to pray for me for faraj, for my reappearance.
Exactly. So perhaps this all this intellectuality alone
exactly
will not perhaps put you on the right path.
Drawing two double red lines under the word alone.
Exactly, yes. Alone will not really put you in the right direction toward closeness to the Imam, because without spirituality you will be void of emotions that you need to connect with the Imam.
Exactly.
And link with the Imam. And these emotions make your heart prepared, perhaps in some sense, to receive the special blessings and for your heart to be illuminated by the divine light of the guidance of the Imam of our time.
Ahsantum.
Thank you very much. So we will be back after a short break with our great audience and dear brothers and sisters, viewers of Imam Hussein TV. So stay with us as some of the most beautiful and breathtaking scenes will be delivered to you through the window of this program. We'll be back with you. Thank you. السلام عليك يا سيدي ومولاي يا صاحب الأمر والزمان أيها المهدي الموعود المنتظر. Dear brothers and sisters, viewers of this program, you're back with us. Welcome back to the studio from Bain al-Haramain, a true piece of paradise. It is our pleasure to be talking to you through this program. Sidna, until this point in the program, perhaps we came to learn that the recipe for getting closer in practice, not only in our perhaps hallucination, right, in practice and in reality, to the Imam as the source of divine spirituality and guidance, as a true refuge and shelter in these troubling times, cannot be elevating and working on our intellectual side alone. We need some complementary, perhaps, tools and means, something to supplement our approach toward the Imam of our time.
Ahsantum. As we were discussing the negatives of those who look at the topic of Mahdawiyya and the topic of the reappearance of the Imam alayhi salam in a merely only intellectual lens, they will fall into problems. And one of the problems is they will contradict in their belief. And how would that happen? Is that because we read in the verses of the Holy Quran, the beginning of the verses of the Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Because when you look at this topic in a merely intellectual way, you start to doubt some of the signs of the reappearance of the Imam alayhi salam. Because many of the signs of the reappearance is to do with the unseen world, with alam al-ghayb, which might not necessarily make sense intellectually to you.
Exactly. And that is a sign of faith.
And that is a sign of faith. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ the whole iman. Now you believe in the Holy Prophet of Islam. Have you seen the Prophet of Islam? For us at this time. You believe in the presence of the Imam of the time, but have we seen the Imam of the time? But it is one of the principles of our faith and our religion that we have to believe in him. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. This is one of the negatives. Now we come to the second path, which is the exact opposite of those who look at this topic, this issue intellectually. There are those who have put intellects aside and they look at the topic of the Mahdawiyyah and the issues surrounding the topic of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam in an only conscious way. Only with the way that their hearts and their desires and their emotions guide them. And that also has its negatives. Why? I will give you examples. Because I don't have time. By examples, inshallah, I will draw the attention of my dear brothers and sisters.
I suppose there are dangerous pitfalls.
Exactly. I will bring you an example from history. The Battle of Jamal. The Battle of Jamal, there were two groups of two camps. In both camps, there existed, let's say, companions of the Holy Prophet. And both camps, those men who were present in both camps that numbered in their thousands, those who were in the camp of Ali ibn Abi Talib, they used to believe that Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he is on the right path. But many of them were looking at this issue from an emotional point of view. But there were others that used to look at this issue from a belief point of view. And the vice versa. In the other camp, there were individuals who were highly respected. There were those revered figures who were given the titles of the mothers of the faithful and the believers. So how could it make sense that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, a highly ranked individual in the camp of Islam, is on one side and another side? So emotionally it's conflicting.
Yes.
Which resulted in many doubting their faith.
Yes.
Because they were confused.
There were some of the most prominent figures who refused to partake in this battle and support the Imam of their time. If I'm not mistaken, Ibn Mas'ud was one of them. Although he was a very close companion to the Prophet and he had heard all the virtues of Amir al-Mu'minin and seen him as the closest kin to the Prophet and the closest person, spiritually speaking, to the Prophet, he refused to participate and assist the Imam of his time, only perhaps because he followed an emotional approach, as you correctly mentioned.
And at this time that we are living in, there are individuals who come and think and ponder about the Imam of their time merely from an emotional point of view, and that has confused many. Now, those present in the Battle of the Camel reached to an extent that the riwayah says, تَزَلْزَلَ فِي إِيمَانِهِ. His faith and belief started shattering. So Imam alayhi salam came to one of them, one of the revered individuals, and said to him, Ya hada, be careful. You do not find truth by following people. لا تعرف الحق بالرجال ولكن اعرف الحق تعرف أهله. The Imam took him and pulled him, told him, don't look at this from an emotional point of view, from an emotional lens. Don't say that in one camp there is the member of the household of the Prophet, or one time she was the member of the house of the Holy Prophet, and on another side the Khalifa of the Muslimin, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. But look where justice lies. So merely looking at the issue of the Imam of our time from a perspective of love, emotion, desire, and not linking yourself to your intellect and to how Islam wants you to believe in the issues of Mahdawiyyah and the reappearance of the Imam of your time, again makes you fall into problems.
Another perhaps issue that may shake the faith of many is the concept of revenge.
Exactly.
That the Imam is going to execute justly and righteously, but perhaps, I suppose, that
Inshallah,
could be another...
Yeah, and the coming nights we will talk about this, as once there are individuals who will be present when the Imam reappears and starts to prevail his power, when he starts to control the area, and some of the actions that he will execute, they will start to doubt.
Yes.
And to an extent that the riwayah says they will face the Imam and they will say to him, "Irja' ya ibn Fatima." The universal reformer that the prophets and the messengers in their thousands, they long to serve the sole existence of this Imam. There are some weak-hearted and weak-minded individuals that have the I don't know what to say. They have the audacity to stand in front of the Imam, Hujjatullah, Imam al-Ardi was-Saman. They say to him, "Irja' ya ibna." They don't even say "Ya Hujjatullah." They say "Irja' ya ibna Fatima." They bring the holy name of Fatima al-Zahra, and saying to him, "Oh Imam, return.
We do not need you."
We do not need you." Why? Because their level of understanding is so confused that they start confusing their own desires and their own interests with the interest of Islam and interest of the Imam of their time. And the last, very quickly, and the last path, which again would not take you on the path of being with the Imam of your time and linking with the Imam of the time, is which is called al-Madras al-Naqliya, which is those who solely rely on the narrations and traditions. They have nothing to do with understanding the core reality of Mahdawiyyah, and they don't resort to the emotional aspects of linking themselves to the Imam of their time with the supplications and the dua and the love and the emotions they have for the Imam. They merely concentrate on learning and drawing themselves closer to the Imam of the time only by following some of the ahadith and the narrations.
In other words, just accumulating knowledge of the ahadith without really finding a practical side to it.
And that is a problem, my dear brother Hajj Muhammad. Why? Because unfortunately in this time and age we see some of the youth, they resort to some of the books of the ahadith and narrations without studying, without spending time in the hawza, in the seminary. They think that by reading some of the narrations and the riwayat, they have become the professor of their time in that field. And they start making their own decisions. They start deciding what they will do. They go into paths of deviation.
And reinterpreting
some of the narrations according to what they think they understand. And this path has its problems as well. Why? Because there are different understandings of these narrations. There are narrations that contradict other narrations. So which narration will you follow? The knowledge of narrations and ahadith and traditions is a whole science.
Yes.
That our scholars, thankfully, and we are so grateful to have these honorable scholars that go spend the whole of their life to come and study these narrations and perfect the sciences so they can deliver the conclusion of their studies to us, so that we are guided. We don't need to go and spend all of our life studying the narrations. So you might ask me at the end of this show, which path should I choose? And I would come and say to you, my dear brother and sister, الطريق الجمعي. You take from each one of these paths to help you make the decision in how you are going to approach the issue of Mahdawiyyah.
Can I call it a collective method?
A collective method, which has intellect's part of it, the conscience plays a big part, the emotions, and also going back to the narrations and the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And where do we get this from? We get it from our Imam, the Imam of our time. The Imam says, in this issue, you need to go back to my sufara. You need to go back to my representatives, and there are criteria to which alim I should be following, which path I need to follow. I can't just go on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Telegram or wherever, and search names of scholars, so-called scholars or speakers or whoever, scientists, and say, okay, I'm going to choose this person because he looks good or he speaks well. This issue of Mahdawiyyah is a very sensitive issue, brothers and sisters, that we need to be very careful who we listen to, who we follow. Not only it has to make sense, but there has to be a portion that links with our emotions. There has to be a clarification. All of this has to make sense with the riwayat and the narrations of the reappearance of the Imam, Zamanul Intidar.
So in other words, we need to be guided by the right people, perhaps, and we need to embark on a journey that takes us towards the Imam closer and closer, one step at a time, by tapping into emotions and our emotional side and using it maybe as a fuel to help us elevate our knowledge of the Imam through the right sources, which are the ulama and maraji, and they can help us perhaps elevate our knowledge of Ahlul Bayt, so that we can study as the traditions and narrations that do not contradict with our intellect, and they actually make sense to us in a global, let's say, approach. So without this global approach and a collective method, having all these pieces and tapping into all these sources, we will perhaps not find the right direction, and we will be we will not perhaps reach the level that the Imam of our time expects. We will not be qualified as a muntaba.
Exactly. And why do I say this issue of the Mahdawiyyah, this issue of the topic of Imam al-Mahdi is very sensitive? Because there have been times in the past history, in the time of the minor occultation, that there were individuals that intellectually they were intellectually they were very smart,
like Shalmaghani, perhaps.
Shalmaghani, Al-Hallaj. These individuals, if I want to name them or give them a title, is like a grand ayatollah, a grand marja of the time, and they were amongst, ulama. But what happened? That's why we say it's very sensitive, because these individuals, they had the knowledge, but they did not link with the whole issue of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam by only you know, taking intellect, knowledge, and the emotions and the desires alongside the narrations. Because the narrations were there, the traditions were there, and they knew, but their desires and their interests overwhelmed the intellect and the knowledge they had.
Their temptations, worldly temptations, perhaps kept them from linking with the Imam and obeying the commands of the Imam.
So, in conclusion, a faithful believer, in order for them to reach the complete belief in reaching the Imam of his time and accompanying the Imam of his time, in being titled the Muntadhir, someone who is waiting, a mu'min, a faithful in waiting, what do they need to do? They need to take intellectual, logical, and scientifical theories alongside the taking into consideration aspects of dua and supplications to purify their emotional side, for them to be able to have a clear mind, so they are able to understand the narrations and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt from the mouth of the sincere ulama. Without this, the fellowship of the ulama and the maraja, the sincere ones, we will not be able to reach the path of accompanying the Imam of our time.
Yes, that's very true. And if you want to take it a step further in the remaining time that we have, how can we serve the Imam of our time? Now, there are hadith that tell us the gaining knowledge of the Imam, or ma'rifah, itself is a way of assisting the Imam and some sort of paying service to the Imam.
How are they going to get that knowledge and ma'rifah?
Ahsan. I mean, that's where I want you to get at. And so this is one way. There are hadith that tell us that, well, supplicate and connect to the Imam spiritually. And of course, we have to study the narrations and the hadith. But, I mean, as you mentioned, the service of the Imam, as a step further, I mean, being a muntadhir is, I suppose, inextricably linked with the concept of serving the Imam. How can we serve the Imam of our time?
The best way we can serve the Imam of our time is when we really understand. عارفاً بحق. When you stand in front of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the narration says من زار الحسين عارفاً بحقه كان كمن زار الله في عرشه. The most important thing is that you don't actually believe that you need to be a follower of Imam al-Mahdi, or have it in your heart that you love to be a follower of Imam al-Mahdi. But we need to reach an ultimate level to understand Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. And how can you understand the Imam of your time? As we discussed yesterday, is that you need to purify yourself, reach a level of akhlaq and wara' and piety, which will open the way for you to be able to receive the rays of knowledge and ilm to understand. Once you understand, and once your lifestyle all becomes surrounded by the issue of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, be assured that the Imam, he will come towards you.
That's very true. So, in other words, if we make efforts to make every single day of our life revolve around the Imam of our time.
That is the trick.
Yeah.
Our life has to revolve around the issue of the Imam of our time. It shouldn't be something secondary, you know.
Yes.
Once, if I have a time, if I have a second, if I have a minute, I will start thinking. When I finish all my other duties, I will think about the Imam of my time.
You. So in everything we do, in every aspect of our life, remembrance of the Imam and trying to be in his service.
When I am awake, when I am asleep,
Exactly.
when I eat, when I drink, when I want to speak to my friends, when I want to have a good time with my family, all of these things come into having the issue, we revolve around the issue of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam.
Perhaps that's the best prescription and recipe to be in real connection with the Imam of our time. May Allah bless us with such fortune, and I can say this is one of the most or highest probably rankings that a human being can achieve in this time. Thank you very much for the gems of knowledge that you shared with me and of course the dear viewers who stayed with us until this moment. We thank you, and it is our sincere hope that you enjoyed this program. You can stay tuned with Imam Hussein TV and watch the program lined up to reach you to the lands of Karbala through the lens of Imam Hussein TV. Welcome to Karbala. Thank you very much and have a beautiful night.